I can't believe that after a year and a half in this channel, I haven't done one single games room tour, or well, games corner tour, let's be honest here, or even a collection video, but something changed yesterday, so that's going to change today. September 2020, I upload my first video onto YouTube and I have even less of a clue back then than I do now. And not only that, I hadn't even decided that I was going to collect or start collecting again at this point. So what you're seeing here in this image is just a handful of games that I've managed to hold on to over the last 20 or 30 years. I had finally made the decision to start properly collecting again in 2021, and by the time we got to 2022, of course, things had changed quite dramatically. Now, if you've been following the channel for the past 18 months, you probably didn't notice this because it was a gradual thing. But looking back at the first videos and then on to the later videos, you can see just how much of an impact the collection had made on the limited space that I had at the time. And you have to remember that being a gamer doesn't mean you just collect games, not the physical games. There's a whole host of other things that come with it. Now, as you can see on the PlayStation 4, 5 and let's call this the modern generation shelves, which is an area that I don't focus on when I'm collecting, so I don't pick up quite as much. But even on these shelves, I had to stack horizontally new games on top of the games that were already in there, something that I absolutely hate doing. And I'm also starting to get a taste for steelbooks and limited edition covers, especially in the modern stuff for some reason, and having such a cramped space to display these wonderful steelbooks and limited edition titles just didn't make any sense. It wasn't making any sense to me. And it's not just the limited editions, it's also the games that you love and want to display, games that you're passionate about, that you would love just to turn face on and have that shown itself in all its glory on your shelves when someone comes in to have a look at it, or of course when it's a backdrop, of course, on a YouTube video. And all this, of course, is just the modern collection problem that I've got at the moment. And what really pushed me over the edge to look for another solution, or at least redesign what I had, is what was happening to the PlayStation 2 collection and the vintage game collection. It quite simply got to the point where I had to stack everything horizontally just to eke out as much space on my shelves as I could. And this is an absolute disaster in my eyes. Not only is it extremely difficult to take individual titles in and out of your collection, and I do play these games on a fairly regular basis, but it's such an eyesore. And then of course there's the systems out with your main focus collection. Games like the Mega Drive and the Xbox games and the Nintendo games that I'm not going to collect a great deal of, but I do want a substantial and significant collection that highlights these systems as best as I can with the space that I've got. And of course the state of the PlayStation 2 collection really pushed me over the edge. I really can't stress how much I don't like horizontal stacking, not just for the practicality of getting games in and out of the collection, but the aesthetic of it. To me, it just doesn't look the same as when they're all lined up vertically. It just looks so much better in my eye anyway. And second only to having everything face on, but that is an absolute dream. So obviously things had to change, and I just set some time aside for myself and got on with what was going to be the new home for the Amiga collection. And in only 3 days from ordering the new shelving units to getting everything built and put up, the new game corner is revealed. Gone, of course, is the horizontal stacking on the PlayStation 2, actually all the games. I did have to compromise and put the PlayStation 2 onto a corner, but that was a small sacrifice to make, taking into consideration the state that the collection was in prior to this. And of course I've got ample room at the front of these shelves if I want to put any front-facing games on display. Now granted, not every game on my PlayStation 2 collection is a looker, but there are a few titles in there that I would love to have face on now and again, such as the JRPGs, the Sui coding games and the like, and of course I've got extra room at the bottom for some of these wonderful handhelds, plug and plays and trinkets. And of course it wasn't just the PlayStation 2 that benefited from this change. The modern games now have their own unit, so PlayStation 5, 4 and 3 are all sitting together in one contained space. And it was a conscious decision to put these systems together because PlayStation 5 and 4 games won't grow at a rapid rate. PlayStation 3 might. I think we'll definitely see an acceleration of PlayStation 3 games coming into the collection over the next year or so. So any space I've got left over at the bottom of this unit will probably be there to be filled by PlayStation 3 games. And much like the shelves for the PlayStation 2, there is room at the front to sit a nice face-on example if I take the notion every now and again. Or of course just have somewhere to stick my Vita and another plug and play, or any other sort of tat that's there just as a placeholder until games move in. Now the second new shelving unit is primarily going to be for vintage games, or more specifically to my collection, PlayStation 1 games. Now it's not that I'm going to collect a lot of PlayStation 1, but there are a few choice titles out there that I still want to get into the collection, and not only that, if I do see a PlayStation 1 game in the wild for fairly cheap, then yes, I'll want it in too. Next to the PlayStation games we have the ZX Spectrum games. Now this is a system that I'm very nostalgic for because it was my first gaming system. A system I got back in 1982 for Christmas and I love it to this day. I won't have a large selection of these games because I don't need them, but the nostalgic ones, they will certainly come in. The bottom section of this shelf will be for systems that I'm not collecting heavily for. The Switch, which I might collect a bit more for. The GameCube, which will be just 1 and 2 pieces as with the Wii. And the Dreamcast. I mean, it'll be rare when I get a Dreamcast game. When it comes to the Mega Drive games, there are titles that I want, but I'll kinda want them boxed. I do have some loose, but they came in bundles. As with the DS, again, it's other titles that I played back in the day that I enjoyed. And for Xbox, it's mostly going to be for Xbox only. And finally, well, PC games, and the PC games I collect, well, they'll all be from the 90s, well, mostly anyway. Of course, the Jolly Roger's still flying proudly above my collection, and the space now that I have above the shelves units is great. Now you'll see a lot of Darth Vader up here because I'm a bit of a Star Wars geek, and don't blame me for that, because up there is a portrait of the only family that meant anything to me. Pops, I'm not going to collect a great deal of Pops. The Pops will be very specific. They'll be important characters from important series and nothing more than that. But of course, being a geek, that could end up being quite a huge collection. Now of course it's not all just Baby Yodas and other trinkets on the top of these shelf units. There are some classic cartridge games and some Amiga games and big box PC games too. And finally up here we have 3 systems that I don't use. The Commodore Amiga A600, the ZX Spectrum, which was the first gaming machine that was mine, and then the Binatone TV Master Mark IV, which was the first gaming machine I ever played back in 1977. So there you go my friends, that's my first ever Games Room tour, or well, should I say Games Corner tour, because that's much more accurate, because space is an absolute premium in Scotland. But you know what, once the kids move on to university, then well, it's going to be plain sailing and there will be a whole games room. Now thank you very much for watching, and of course if you want to talk about anything that you've seen today, drop that down in the comments, because the interaction between you and me is what makes YouTube special. Well, that's what makes it special for me anyway. Thank you again for watching, and until next time from the New Games Corner, cheerio!